Hey guys, Chris here from Carolot Farm. Good morning and welcome. It's a beautiful sunny day. Today I am going to start off like all days feeding my lovely minis. I don't know if you can see, Sweetheart's already waiting for me at the gate. I've already given them their morning hay, but she is very eager for her grain. But what I'm up to today, again, after I feed the minis, and I do want to show you what I'm feeding Rocky because we've just recently started grading him a little bit, and I want to share that because there might be some of you like me that have a mini that just needs a little something, and maybe you're kind of questioning what should that be, right? With the minis, we do have to be mindful about what we feed them and how much we feed them. But after I get the minis squared away, my little guys, I have some planting to do. It is now approaching the second half of May. And in May, I like to plant my squash, my zucchini, my cucumbers, green beans, and okra. Those are kind of like the 5 big ticket items that I want to get in the ground before the end of May. So I know this is going to be a busy week for me. Today, though, the really big push today, first and foremost, will be the squash and zucchini. We have started these from seed. They've been growing in the house for a couple of weeks now, and they're definitely ready to go into the garden. So first thing the minis, second thing the garden. So here I have the containers I like to use. These are just your standard Chinese food containers. This is kind of the medium size, and this is the large. When I measured out my grain and weighed it, this small one here, when it's filled to the brim, it's about 1/2 pound, and this is Triple Crown Senior. So not all grains are the same weight, but the Triple Crown Senior, when this is full, it's about 1/2 pound. But for Rocky, I'm only giving him like 2/3 to 3/4 right now. He's really just getting a little bit, and I've already dumped it in there, silly me. But he's just getting a little bit right now. I feel he's ever so slightly thin, and I just want to put a little weight on him. Now, Sweetheart, my older mare, she is the one who has the cough and sort of a chronic breathing condition, which is just causing her body to work a little harder. And so she has actually been getting about 1.5 pounds of Triple Crown Senior. And, you know, her weight is looking really good. So some days I actually give her a little less, you know, maybe a full container and 1/3. But for both of these horses, being as we're feeding the Triple Crown Senior, I do like to moisten it because as you can see, there's a lot of beet pulp mixed in here, and we want to make sure that is rehydrated before the horses start to eat it. But I just wanted to show you that because when we spoke to our feed specialist, this is what they recommended for the minis. It's lower in carb, lower in sugar. And because we're trying to put weight on our horses, this was what was recommended versus the balancer. When I mentioned the Triple Crown Senior, I said it was lower in sugar and carbs, I think is what I said. In all honesty, I'm not entirely sure. I went back and I reread over my notes from my friend when I spoke to her about the different grain options that she recommended for the minis. And what I saw that I had made a note of was that if you were trying to put weight on your mini, she did recommend the Triple Crown Senior because it has more calories and fewer carbs and starches and sugars, I would imagine, in comparison to some other grains. But the balancer, she did note, was a fine feed to be giving your horse if you were looking to just maintain their weight. And again, I'm just talking about minis right now. With minis, they eat such a small amount of grain that we do want to be really careful about the choices that we give them. But the balancer, she said, was a good one if you're just maintaining, like I said. But if you were looking to try to put a little weight on them, she did recommend the Triple Crown Senior. And I have spoken to 2 different vets over the last month or so. And, you know, just trying to get their recommendations. One of them recommended balancer, and one of them said, no, the Triple Crown that you're feeding should be the perfect thing. So I think as long as you are mindful about the amount of grain you're giving your horse and you're monitoring them very closely, I think both of those seem to be pretty well recommended feeds for miniatures. But I wanted to share that because that was one thing that I just wasn't sure about. You know, this is the first year I've owned minis. I've had horses in the past, of course, but first year with minis, and I want to be very mindful about the choices I make for them and make sure that they're in their best interest. So I want to share that with you, because that's the whole point of this journeying through the year with us, is so I can share with you what we learn and what we experience, and you know, the good, the bad, all of it, right? But I'm really happy that I can share this, because I'm sure there are others out there who are in a similar situation, and the more we can work together and support each other, the better. Sweetheart is ready. I'm coming, sweet girl. Rocky also knows it's time for breakfast. Hi, sweet boy. I'm coming. I'm coming, guys. Ever since I started feeding Rocky, you know, he comes into this neighboring feedlot beside Sweetheart, and he's able to eat his grain in this little short tub. It works well for him. He's really good about not pawing or knocking it over. And then Sweetheart, I still tie her bucket up, because she does have a tendency to want to paw at it. But we do tie her bucket up so that she can't spill it. But they're very peaceful. I'm so happy that we have these two feedlots, because it makes it really easy just to quickly separate them from the others, and then I can very easily turn them back out. As Sweetheart and Rocky are eating in the feedlots, and being as Shenanigans was right here in the barnyard with me, I'm going to take advantage of these few minutes and the shade here that we have at the barn, and I'm going to continue to work on shedding him. He still has the most amount of winter coat still on him. He is shedding out, but it is a slow process. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes here with him and see if I can't get a little more of this hair off. Now that the horses are all finished with their morning grain, they've had their fly spray put on, everyone's been turned out, even little Rocky, who is still hoping to maybe get a little more. But now that they're all ready to go and they've got their fly spray on for the day, I am going to head off now to the garden and do my very best to get that squash and zucchini and perhaps a few of the other crops into the ground today before it gets too hot. I've got my squash and zucchini here that we have started indoors. I think my husband started the seeds maybe two weeks ago. These plants popped up a lot faster indoors than, you know, our earlier crops like the broccoli, cauliflower. Those took longer to come up from seed, but the squash and zucchini popped up real quick, and they're ready for the garden. And I believe we have about 3 different varieties of each. I'm not exactly sure what varieties they are, but I see that my husband has multiple little tags in here, and I'll try to note what they are once they go into the ground, because we do like to keep track of what performs the best. You know, is there a certain variety of squash or zucchini that really thrives here? So we do like to try to keep up with that when we can. But now that I have these, the next thing I'm going to do, and I'll show you, we have just tilled the soil behind me one more time. We gave it a final till last night. And now I'm going to take my rake and make some mounds. I do like to mound my squash and zucchini. That's just kind of typically how I do it. I've tried making like a long berm or row before, but I think I'm going to go with the mounds this year. So I've just counted my zucchini and my squash, and sometimes things just work out. I have 10 zucchini, which means I have 9 or 10 squash, because I have a total of 19 pots that have sprouted. I have gone and made 20 hills. I have 10 here and 10 over here. So now I will very carefully pop my plants out of their pots. One little tip I'd like to share, after I have grubbed the piles and removed the weeds, I actually just set them into the center pathway for right now, and I'll come back with a bucket and pick them up and actually take them to my larger discard pile later. But after I have pulled all of the weeds out, you can see I have gone on this one row. I've only done this first side so far, but I've gone back after grubbing the pile, and I have made a little well sort of in the center of the hill. And that way, when the plant is watered or when it rains, more of the water can really funnel down to the roots of the plant. And that will be especially important in the summer when we kind of get into our drier season, when the plants need every little bit of rain or watering that they can get. Because these plants were already sprouted, I probably didn't have to build the mounds, but just out of habit, I've always put my squash and zucchini in either, individual hills or one long mound. So I've just gone ahead and done that because that's just kind of what I'm accustomed to. But I imagine if you have already sprouted yours, you probably could just put them into the flat garden after it's been tilled.
Not all of the seeds that we planted germinated, but the ones that did have a pretty decent root structure, and they should be able to take pretty well in the garden.
I have just finished planting my rows of squash and zucchini. Like I told you, I have one row of squash and one row of zucchini. I believe the squash has 9 hills and the zucchini had 10. Some of the squash plants, so I think there were at least 2, had twins in the pot, so those hills do have two plants in them. So technically I have a few more squash plants than zucchini, but pretty much a fairly even planting, which will be nice, We have found though in past years, and we found this to be true with our seeds indoors as well. The zucchini seeds, for whatever reason, only come up about half as well as the squash. So, some years when I plant directly into the garden with my squash and zucchini, I have to come back and overseed the zucchini. So I'm not really sure why that is. If you buy a package of squash seeds and a package of zucchini seeds, I have found that usually there are twice as many squash seeds in a package. And, it's like you get more of the seeds that come up better, which is a little frustrating sometimes, but maybe that's just us. But I'm really happy with what we have right now in the ground. We should have a pretty good crop. So this is the first year we've started them indoors. So we'll see just how well they do. I've always just sowed the seeds directly into the ground around this time of year. So we're hoping to get an earlier crop of squash and zucchini. And the reason for that is we're hoping to be ahead of the really bad squash bug infestation that happens every year. So we'll see. We'll let you know. We like to water our garden plants as much as possible with a cup, and that way we can make sure that the water is really funneled right down to the plant itself. Forgive my shadow. And that's another reason for putting the wells around the plant, is to really direct that water so that we're not watering the hill, we're just watering the plant. In somewhat similar fashion to making a mound with a well, I have made a little bit of a kind of a raised path with a little trench in the middle. And these 2 trenches will be where I will plant my okra seeds. I want to show you our okra seeds. They're very, very small. They're these little round seeds. And so that was why I put those little trenches in the ground for them. I'm going to go now. I'm going to actually kind of split my seeds. I'm going to eyeball what I have, and I'm going to split them in half and then just sort of sprinkle them one at a time down the pathway. And then that way, hopefully I can just take what I have and make the most of these 2 rows. Okra plants can get to be very tall. 6 to 10 feet tall easily. By the end of the growing season, I'm actually having to bend down the plant so I can actually harvest the okra pods from the top. So the plants get very tall and they can get pretty broad as well. So if these seeds are, 9 to 12 inches apart, that's really not a big deal. If they're closer, they just help each other to stand up, which isn't such a problem either. So some years I plant them thicker than others, but I'll just kind of see how far these seeds go. These seeds we harvested ourselves about 2 years back. I think the bag says 23. So these were okra pods that we grew in 23. We harvested the seeds after the pods had dried, and we had a lot of success growing our own okra last summer. And so I'm going to take these same seeds that were left over and I'm going to plant them into the garden this year. If I don't see anything, coming up, here are those trenches behind me. If I don't see anything coming up in the next 2 weeks, I'll go to the store and just buy a new pack of seeds and overseed them. But I feel pretty certain that some of these will take. So I'm going to sprinkle them in now, and then I'll have to cover them gently with soil, give it a little water, and then we'll have to wait and see. Now that I have finished planting my okra, kind of in my little trench here, I'm going to come back with my watering can and just very gently water everything. I'll come back this evening and do the same thing. I have put, you know, 2 little stakes at the end, so I have a pretty good sense where to water. But that's another reason doing a trench like this can be helpful, because it gives you a good visual as to where you want your water to go. So again, you're not watering random, aimless ground. You're really just focusing on where the seeds are. The last thing I'm going to plant today are my green beans. I've got 2 packages here, and I think that should do pretty well. I'm going to use this large planter behind me this year to put my green beans inside of. And the reason for that is I will want to cover my green beans. Last year, I had a really beautiful stand of green beans, and right about the time they were getting ready to flower and bear fruit, the groundhog came into our garden, and I kid you not, literally picked every single leaf off of every single plant. All I had were stems left. And so, you know, we then promptly covered them, and I ended up with like 1 or 2 very small morsels of green beans, which was disheartening. So this year, I'm trying to stay 1 step ahead of my little friend, the groundhog, and I'm gonna plant my green beans in the planter, and then I will have something to really cover my beans with. That way I can use clips and deer netting or some sort of netting to cover my green beans. I'm not sure exactly how tall they get. I do think that they're going to get taller than this real short planter. Originally, I was going to use the green planter in the back here, but that still has our cauliflower inside of it. That one's a good bit taller. So I might have to create some little stakes and actually elevate the netting as our bush beans. These are Blue Lake bush beans. So after these start to grow a little taller, we might have to raise the netting just so that they don't grow through the netting. But that's what I'm up to now. It'll be my last plant of the day, and then I'm going to be heading off to meet my daughter. I have some things to deliver to her, and I'll be back this evening. We'll water everything again, but this is the last big thing for the day in the garden. Something I like about the green beans is you can actually lay them out and kind of space them. The beans are pretty visual. You know, these are white. I've had some green beans that were more of like a green or brown speckled bean looking. But these are white and they're real easy to see. So I have laid my 2 packages of beans out in, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 or more rows. And I've spaced them in between these rods. I figure the rods can actually help the plants stand tall once they get bigger. So now that I've laid them out, it's time to press them down into the soil, cover them gently, and then give them a little water.
Now that we have finished planting and watering for the day, I want to give you one more look around. I'm really happy with how our garden is doing this year. We certainly have a lot more plants that we have started from seed ourselves indoors, and so that's nice to see these plants really transfer into the garden and begin to thrive.
I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. You know, we started with the horses as usual, and then we made our way into the garden. It's a pretty typical day for this time of year. Pretty soon our planting should be over, and then it will just be a matter of, you know, weeding every so often, and then ultimately we'll start picking, you know, in another few weeks to a couple months. You know, it's just now approaching the middle to end of May. So I would imagine by mid-June, you know, we'll be getting some other, you know, vegetables here in the garden. Our sugar snap peas, we have been harvesting a few of them. You can see them behind me here. You know, when the little critter got in a few weeks ago, it did a little damage to my peas. They're doing okay. I've gotten a few, but it's not the best crop. I've certainly seen much better sugar snaps. We will not be having any extra sugar snaps to blanch and freeze this year, which is fine. You know, some years you have a lot, some years you don't. That's how it is. But everything else is good to go. You know, today I put the squash and zucchini in, the okra, and the green beans. And those were the really big items I wanted to get in before the end of the month. I think the last couple of little things I want to put in will be our pickling cucumbers and maybe some more summer herbs like basil or more dill. Those are things that we always enjoy having. So those can wait a few more days. Maybe tomorrow. I think we're looking at more rain by the middle of the week. So today was really perfect. The garden was still damp from last week's really heavy rain, but it wasn't muddy. So it was kind of the perfect day to garden. So got a lot done. Long story short, farewell. Thank you again. Check back often. And, you know, we're always up to something. So see you soon. Bye, guys.